Ukrainian cities are suffering relentless Russian drone attacks. Residents of Kharkiv heard at least 15 explosions late Tuesday evening. However, according to the regional prosecutor's office, Moscow troops launched around 20 strikes, most of them in the Osnovyansky district. A number of civilian enterprises were damaged and 2 people were injured.
Our warehouse is completely destroyed. It was a direct hit. Everything burned down in there and cannot be restored. Wet wipes, furniture, bakery products. This is what we had there. There were no military objects, nothing of that sort.
In the Industrialny district, a warehouse caught fire as the result of Russia's drone attacks. In the Syrskyi district, residential buildings were damaged. Early data shows that Russian forces used Gerань 2 UAVs to target Ukraine's second-largest city.
This is our enemy's new tactic to frighten civilians. This is civilian infrastructure in the city. These are production enterprises. These are Kharkiv's business people. Of course they are scared. Also, when people go to sleep at night, when children go to sleep and they encounter such loud strikes, the goal is to frighten people.
Meanwhile, 15 people were injured in Dnipro, with 8 of them being hospitalized. The regional governor reported that Russian troops launched a massive drone attack on the region, of which 11 were eliminated by the air defense. 15 private houses, 4 residential buildings, as well as nearly 24 cars were damaged. Several enterprises and administrative building infrastructure were also affected. The consequences of another Russian attack were dealt with by rescuers in the Donetsk region. Moscow UAVs targeted Kramatorsk, damaging a residential building in the city center. A family of 3 were injured, among them an 11-year-old girl. The Ukrainian Air Force destroyed a Russian command post in the temporarily occupied Kherson region using a precision strike on April 7th. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported on April 9th that a structure housing the Russian 81st Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment was completely destroyed. Preliminary reports suggest the elimination of up to 30 Russian soldiers, with further details still being confirmed. Russian forces have already begun an offensive on the Sumy and Kharkiv regions, reported Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrskyi. In an interview with LB.ua, he was asked about recent comments made by the Ukrainian president, who warned that Russia was planning offensive operations in those directions. Syrskyi stressed that Zelensky was completely right, adding that the number of Russian offensive actions across those key frontline areas had nearly doubled over the past week. Additionally, the commander-in-chief addressed the autumn joint military drills scheduled between Russia and Belarus and the risk of a renewed attack from the north. Syrskyi warned that these exercises could be used to covertly amass a strike force. The upcoming meeting between US and Russian delegations will cover issues of the functioning of their diplomatic missions. This was stated by the US State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce during a press conference, stressing that Ukraine is not on the agenda of the negotiations.
On April 10th, US and Russian delegations will meet for a second time in Istanbul to try to make progress on further stabilizing the operations of our bilateral missions. So that is happening in Istanbul. There are no political or security issues on the agenda, and Ukraine is not, absolutely not on the agenda. These talks are solely focused on our embassy operations, not on normalizing a bilateral relationship overall, which can only happen, as we've noted, once there is peace between Russia and Ukraine.
China is verifying reports of its citizens being captured in Ukraine, stated China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian. Speaking at a press briefing, he underlined that Beijing always advises its citizens to stay away from areas of armed conflict.
The Chinese side is verifying the relevant situation with the Ukrainian side. It needs to be emphasized that the Chinese government had always requested its citizens to stay away from areas of armed conflict and avoid being involved in armed conflict in any form, especially participating in the military operations of any army.
According to Reuters, in response to a question that Ukraine holds evidence of Chinese citizens taking part in the war, Lin Jian emphasized that this statement is groundless.
China's position on the Ukrainian crisis issue is clear and widely recognized by the international community. Ukraine should correctly view China's efforts and constructive role in seeking a political solution to the Ukrainian crisis.
On Tuesday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine summoned China's Chargé d'Affaires in Kyiv following reports that Chinese nationals have joined Russian forces in combat against Ukraine. On his X page, the Ukrainian foreign minister stressed that Chinese citizens fighting as part of Russia's invasion army in Ukraine puts into question China's declared stance for peace and undermines Beijing's credibility as a responsible permanent member of the UN Security Council. Russia outlines goals to resettle at least 5 million people in the territories it occupies in Ukraine by 2030. These plans were reportedly discussed at the Integration 2025 forum in Rostov-on-Don in April. According to Petro Andrushenko, former advisor to the mayor of Mariupol and head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, the additional population would likely be brought in from Russia, pointing out that there are already significant numbers of Central Asian migrants working in these regions. Russian authorities have been pursuing a policy of Russification in the occupied areas, including the relocation of Ukrainian children to Russian-controlled territories. Starting this year, Russia began classifying Ukrainians in occupied territories as foreigners if they refused Russian citizenship. Those who don't comply lose access to healthcare and other basic rights. 32 foreign ambassadors and representatives of diplomatic missions, including the EU and the UN, visited Kryvyi Rih to honor the victims of a Russian missile attack. On April 4th, Russian troops targeted a residential area of the city with an Iskander cluster missile, killing 9 children and 11 adults and injuring more than 70. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said it's important for foreign diplomats to see the consequences of Russian terror with their own eyes. At the UN Security Council meeting on Tuesday, the US ambassador to the United Nations, Dorothy Shea, stressed that strikes like the one in Kryvyi Rih have the potential to damage peace efforts.
We urge the Russian Federation to bear in mind that strikes like those on Kryvyi Rih and executions of prisoners of war have the potential to damage peace efforts and all dependent discussions. The April 4th missile strike further underscores the need for an end to this devastating war, and we will ultimately judge President Putin's commitment to a ceasefire by Russia's actions.
The national digital education platform Mriia is now available to all Ukrainian schools. Since last year, it has been tested in 40 educational facilities across 6 regions. This year, 2,000 schools are expected to join up. According to President Zelensky, Mriia simplifies the entire learning process, noting that every school in Ukraine can now access a unified digital education system.
During the test period alone, there are already more than 2 million grades on Mriia. Parents have checked in on their children's school progress 313,000 times and opened lesson details 150,000 times to see what their children are learning and how to support them.
Mriia combines lesson plans, electronic journals, homework, and a personalized library into a single streamlined app. This year, a new AI-based functionality will be integrated for teachers, particularly automating tasks like making tests.
There will also be a bonus system, which means the opportunity to receive certain additional bonuses for good grades, for attendance, which can be used, for example, to buy a ticket to the cinema.